Sold by Jaarsveld. I am old now. I forget how old, and I'm not certain I ever really knew. But I will tell you what I do remember of my life as a tiny woman. Chapter 1. First Experience. I never grew up. Literally, my body only changed shape. My hair grew long, and my parents were paid money when people wanted to watch me perform. I loved to sing. It was the one thing that made me feel bigger than my life. If I was being stared at, my parents would charge for it. One day, the carnival came to town. They paraded down the street performing while they walked. There was a huge banner being carried by two of the tallest people I've ever seen, announcing, "The greatest carnival alive." They were followed by a man with a monkey sitting on a musical box. The monkey would stand and dance around. He looked to be laughing at everyone. There were clowns on bicycles riding in circles and figure of eights. They looked like they would crash sometimes, but they never did. The clowns were short, but not as short as me. Then came a truck, pulling cages with animals inside. It looked like a train of animals. I saw a gorilla in one, then a tiger, or at least it sounded like a big cat. I wasn't sure. The last animal I saw was a bear. The cage had a sign saying he performed tricks. I was so excited to see that. There was a man walking around yelling, "Popcorn! Peanuts! Get your peanuts!" in a loud, raspy voice. The smell of a salty butter from the popcorn made me hungry. A girl was carrying cotton candy in a tray. There was even a girl selling cigarettes, stacked in neat rows in a tray. Could you imagine? I'd never heard of such a thing. Next in line were 3 horses and a woman in dazzling costumes standing on their backs. One waved at me. Oh, she was so pretty. Following the ladies was a man riding on an elephant, sitting just behind her ears. The man hit the elephant with a long stick, which had 2 pronged metal V-shaped tips on the end, with one being straight and the other curved out. The man made her get down on her knees. That made me so mad. The elephant was carrying him, and he hit her and made her bow. The nerve! I hadn't been that mad since someone tried to carry me like a doll. I yelled, but of course no one heard me over the parade. I stood on my stage in the front yard, which was a box with stairs that my father built from pallets, and watched them walk by. There was music, which sounded as if it was from a piano, but it had a metal tinging sound. Next was a small truck with a banner on the side which said, "Human Curiosities." There came trailers and caravans with people walking alongside them, trying not to step in what the animals had left behind. The trailers were painted with the faces of the trailer's inhabitants. The bearded lady, Siamese twins, the elephant man and the fat lady, the giant twins, dwarfs, midgets, clowns and many more. I was intrigued. They were fantastic. Some of them looked above my head as if they didn't even see me, even on my box. When the last caravan had gone by, they looked over to me. A man with tattoos all over himself blew me a kiss. When I looked round and saw no one near me, I winked back and smiled. The bearded lady waved and I waved back. They were all being very nice. Well, the ones who saw me at least. A dwarf and midgets were handing out flyers. One of the dwarves ran up to me, handed me a flyer, making sure I had a firm grip on it. Then he backed away. He bowed to me. I smiled and curtsied back to him. He laughed, waved, and ran off. I looked at the flyer. Attached was a free ticket for opening night. Tonight. I waved back so hard that my box shook. The flyer stated we would be greeted by the monkey on his musical box, a fire eater, the sword swallower, and some selling popcorn, as well as games to win balloons or toy animal prizes. There would be bands made up of different races and oddities, dancers from different cultures, performing to attract people to the main tent. You could see the freaks for free with my ticket, and the animals. I couldn't stand still. I was so excited I almost tripped running into the house. My parents were fighting, so I listened. It wasn't hard with them yelling. What are we supposed to do with no extra money coming in? Why are you yelling at me? You're the one who purchases lavish clothes to show her off in. Well, what do you want me to do? Sell her to the circus? I ran back outside and hid. Were my parents talking about selling me? I was their child. How could you sell your child? I wanted to run away and join the circus myself. I had an even better idea. I would set it up to be rid of them, if that was how they felt. Joining the carnival would be perfect. I looked at the flyer and the free ticket attached. Chapter 2. Sold. I waited until the house was quiet to go in. I wasn't sure they knew I was outside. They didn't like my being outside alone. My mum was sitting having a drink at the kitchen table. A drink and a cigarette were her choice after an argument she had won. I pondered over the results. I simply stood there with the flyer in my hands. She looked and saw the flyer and said nothing, so I handed it to her. She looked at the flyer for some time while she finished her drink. Fingering the ticket, she didn't say a word. I hadn't seen this particular expression on her face before. She finally stopped and looked at me. I suppose you'd like to go. There is a free ticket after all, she said. She said it almost as a sneer. I was becoming scared. Mum didn't act that way toward me, ever. She might have gotten irritated with me sometimes, but I tried to be good. I didn't want to lose the chance to go, but I wasn't sure if I was supposed to say something or not. So I just stood there, wringing my hands. She told me to go to my room until supper, and she would talk with Father about it. I did as I was told, hoping it meant we could all go to the carnival. The ticket was only good for opening night, and for one person. I could hear their raised voices, but they weren't fighting. I was hoping that was a good thing. I was called to supper right after. Mum announced she and I would be going to the carnival on opening night that night to use the free ticket. I looked over to my father. If I didn't know better, I'd say he looked sad, while Mum looked more happy about going than I felt. My skin felt cold with goosebumps. When she announced we might go to see a friend of hers, I suspected something was very wrong. She never took me to see her friends, as I was a distraction. Then she told me to wear my long oriental dress with the slits and leggings, and she would be in to help me pack an overnight case. I knew something was definitely going on. Father wouldn't look at me. He even got up from the table before he finished his supper, and it was our favourite dinner. He loved pot roast with gravy, potatoes and carrots. I took another bite, but I couldn't swallow it. When we went to refill her drink, I spat it out in my napkin. When Mother came back, I asked to be excused. She said we might be gone longer than a day, and we could go to some place nice. So I needed to pack most of my clothes to have choices. I nodded and ran to my room. I didn't want her to hear me crying. It would spoil the night at the carnival. I walked around the house and I couldn't find my father, so I went to my room and started pulling clothes out of the drawers. I decided to pack my favourite things. Somehow, I knew inside that I would never see my room again. I packed what I liked, including the shoes and makeup, most of which belonged to her. She wouldn't have approved, but I also packed my favourite book and my comfortable clothes like leggings with long shirts, boots and sundresses. I liked the bright blue and sparkly light purple costumes with matching shoes, pale pink lipstick, my beautiful red oriental dress and slippers. The perk of being tiny meant I could pack more. I was leaving behind the gaudy, beaded costumes, the pink dress that I hated, and the red lipstick. I put the stuff I wasn't taking into a box in the back of my closet, where I hid the stuff that she didn't like me to have. I was doing this for me. I couldn't believe how stupid she thought I was, that I didn't know what was happening. I may have a small body, but my brain is full-sized. Taking one last look at my room, I was satisfied I had everything I wanted to keep. I dragged my suitcase to the living room. Mother had her summer coat out and her handbag. I noticed she didn't even have a cosmetic bag with her. She wouldn't be gone long without it. I walked around the house, making sure I wasn't forgetting anything I would miss. I wasn't. For the first time, I noticed on the mantel there was one family picture of Mother and Father. None of me or the whole family. I thought there would have been. I wondered why I'd never noticed that before. But it was probably due to my height. I only saw it now because I was looking for it. I went to the hall wardrobe and opened my suitcase. I pulled out my winter things and packed them. Mum gave me an odd look but said nothing. When I was satisfied at everything that I wanted from this house, I started to close my suitcase for the last time. Father stopped me and put something in my suitcase, then fastened it close. He patted me on the head and said, "Have a good life." Not a good time. Chapter 3. Adjusting. I caught his hand in mine and hugged it. He looked at me with red eyes. Had he been crying? He coughed and took his hand away. Father smelled of alcohol. He said nothing when he left the room. Mum announced it was time to go to the carnival. I grabbed my backpack, which was from the doll, and put it on. I'd seen my father with it earlier, but didn't say anything. It was time to go. I grabbed my suitcase and a flyer with my ticket. I was surprised when Mum offered to carry my case. She placed it in the back seat with me, not in the trunk. She didn't use the back seat, always saying, "People with class only carry people in their seat. Everything else should be placed in the trunk." I tried not to cry. I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. We pulled away from our home and I waved goodbye. In my mind, I was plotting how to get even with my mother and her perfectly made-up face, dyed hair and manicured nails. Maybe if she didn't look so perfect, I mused. My father just letting her take me away was just as unforgivable. Red eyes and tears or not. We arrived at the carnival right on time for opening night. They were just starting to allow admissions. I was standing looking out the window of the car, trying to see. Mother braked hard, making my head bump on the window. Looking in the rearview mirror, she had a smile on her face as I rubbed my sore head. When we got out, she took my suitcase. I didn't say anything. She didn't hold my hand or carry me. But then, she didn't usually anyway. There was a monkey sitting on his musical box with the man cranking the handle by the window where they took my ticket, and Mother purchased hers. She gave me a frown. There was a salt swallower and a fire breather was after that. They were amazing. The snake charmer lady was beautiful, but a little scary. The snake was huge and wrapped itself around her. She acted like she was going to kiss it. I read my stories where you kissed a frog to get a prince, not a snake. I wanted to remind her, but I looked the other way. I could hear her laughing. It was a pretty sound. I smelled the salted butter popcorn, but I didn't dare ask for any, even though I was hungry. Before the big top tent were performers dancing and speaking in languages I'd never heard. I saw the sign for the human curiosities and wanted to go there. She saw me looking and had the same sinister smile once again. She suggested we go that way. A man in a black tuxedo stood and walked towards us. He introduced himself as the owner and the ringmaster. He had been talking with other people whom he dismissed, leaving the patio table and chairs unoccupied. He was looking mostly at me, but shook Mother's hand. You could tell it irritated her since she wanted the attention. He asked if he could help me onto the table so we could speak face to face. I nodded, and he sat me in the middle of the table, nodding for Mother to sit. He had several questions such as my height, my age, then looked at Mother and asked about my birth certificate, my shop record, and any medical information. He curled his moustache, which twitched when he spoke, and I tried not to laugh. I didn't want to appear rude after all. I answered the first question. 47 centimetres, I replied with a smile. He smiled back with a kindness. I knew my height from the doctor's office. She answered, She's 18, with regards to my age. He was shaking his head no. He handed the man some papers in a big envelope. He pulled the important-looking papers out of the envelope and read them. She looked from the papers to me. Shaking his head, he beckoned someone to come out of the trailer. A very tall lady stepped out from the open door of the nearest trailer and handed Mum some papers to sign, which were signed by the man too, then stamped by the tall lady in the dress suit. She had a pretty smile. After the papers were signed, he handed Mother a thick brown envelope tied with a string. She pulled at the string to open it and cut her finger. No one even said a word. Everyone stood, and I wondered what I'd missed. I should have been paying attention, not daydreaming, but the big words like guardianship, legal custody, they were confusing to me. The lady carried my suitcase to the trailer and came back out. She saw me looked toward it and assured me it was safe there. She smiled and asked if she could carry me, if I would show her how. She had a deep voice, deeper than my father's. Her hands were bigger than his as well. I said to hold me like a toddler sitting up. She got it right first time. It was very comfortable. I could see so much because she was so tall. My mother held out her hand to shake with the ringmaster. He didn't shake her hand and pointed to the blood dripping from her finger. She took a handkerchief from her purse and wrapped it around her finger. Mother walked off without looking back. She didn't even tell me goodbye. That was the day I was sold to the carnival. I'm Samantha. You know what's happening, don't you, little one? I shook my head. I'm Mia, was all I could say. I was trying hard not to cry, but I really wanted someone to hold me while I cried. Chapter 4. Fitting in with other freaks. Samantha thought I needed my first night to adjust, and said she would explain things tomorrow, and introduce me to everyone then. We had corn dogs for dinner, and relaxed on the patio. We could hear all the noise and excitement, but I was happy for some peace and time to adjust. Samantha said she needed to do something, and came back with popcorn. I was so excited and ate most, or a lot of the popcorn by myself. She teased that I ate my weight in popcorn. I wasn't sure what she meant by that, but we both laughed about it. She explained to me that being sold didn't mean exactly that. I would earn cash wages to save, because I was now an employee and could come and go at a later date if I chose, once my sold contract was up. I also had to be of legal age, whatever that meant. This was one of the good carnivals to work for, and she had been there for lots of years. If it was okay with me, I would be living with Samantha. I was more than happy to hear that. So happy that I jumped up from sitting on the table and hugged her. I think she had a tear. I know I did, but for happiness. Someone actually wanted me. I would sleep in Samantha's trailer on a bed which looked made for me. It was off to the side so Samantha wouldn't step on it. She did have kind of big feet. I teased her what she could use my bed for a shoe if she had another bed. She thought it was funny. My bed had a beautiful silk blanket with matching pillows. Samantha made them from some of her scarves for me. My clothes were partially unpacked in a wardrobe which suited my height. I could get my own clothes out without a stool or help. It felt good. I looked at my suitcase to finish unpacking and to see what my father had put in there. It was a photo of me as a baby. That was all. I went to my backpack to see what my father had placed in there. A tube of red lipstick. He knew I hated red lips. I would never wear it again. It reminded me of her. Or maybe I should wear it to remind me of what I needed to do to her. Maybe. I was so mad I was shaking. Samantha was talking to me, but I didn't hear her. I went back to my suitcase. Samantha was staring at me with her mouth open when I turned around. I'd been squeezing my fists so tight they dripped blood. "Oh no, child, no! You can't let them do that to you." She picked me up and was carrying me, telling me to shush. I tried to pull back and she held me tighter till I started to cry. Then I cried, and it all came forward. All of my mother's emotional abuse and the jealousy, her being hateful to my father not even fighting for me. I cried until I was almost asleep. Samantha rocked me and held me like a child who was loved and cherished. I gave her a hug and she hugged me back. She sat me on a chair and came with a warm washcloth and a tube of ointment. Saying thank you, I washed my face. I didn't have much makeup on, so it didn't take long to remove it. Looking at my blood on Samantha's beautiful clothes, I apologised. What, this old thing? She brushed at the blood as if to make it disappear. She winked, then helped me clean the blood off my hands. It was already dry, but she put ointment on the small cuts anyway. I jumped down from her chair and asked Samantha where the small furniture came from. She said one of the dwarves is a craftsman in woodworking. I asked to meet him so I could give him my thanks. Samantha threw on a shawl and took me to meet the dwarf. He was working in a workshop. It had a wooden wall at the back with a door, but the front and sides were canvas material, with the front twin door flaps tied open. He was the same one who had given me my ticket to the carnival. She introduced us. Derek, I would like you to meet Mia. He stopped what he was working on and looked around. Upon seeing me, he bowed and I replied with a curtsy. When we started laughing, Samantha looked confused, so Derek filled her in. You see, little one, you know 2 people here now, Samantha pointed out. Derek came over and shook my hand as I was thanking him for my bed and wardrobe. My hand felt all tingly. He smiled. I think he felt it too. He was working without a shirt on. He looked like a small, tattooed, black bodybuilder with ice blue eyes. He slipped a tank on. I wish he would leave it off. It was very cute. Samantha chose that time to whisper, "He's single." I elbowed her somewhere, not taking my eyes off him. I heard her chuckle. I knew I was blushing, and I suspected Derek saw and heard everything because his cheeks were a little red too. With a smile on his face beaming, I'm fairly certain he was happy. Chapter 5. Preparations. Just after our blush encounter, we heard someone yelling his name. I guess he'd lost track of time. Since it was opening night, he needed to get ready for his stunts in the big tent. He covered whatever he was working on and started to run out of his tent. He ran back and kissed my cheek, then ran back out, waving and yelling that he'd see us later. I was in an excited shock. My first kiss. If a kiss on the cheek counted. To me it did. Samantha was laughing and had her hands clasped together. We walked back towards Samantha's wagon and decided against it. Instead, we went to the mess hall. Samantha explained it was an open tent in the middle of where our wagons were, away from the public. It was where Shotty and his giant wife, Matilda, made and served our meals, as well as a place to visit, relax, have meetings. Basically, our communication centre. She introduced me to Shorty and Matilda, as well as several who didn't work on opening night during the show or were on breaks. Sometimes the other carnival workers stopped by, but mostly this was the freak zone. After we had a cola and visited for a bit, I started yawning. Samantha saw this and we excused ourselves, saying it had been a long day. They acted like they understood. They both gave me a big hug and welcomed me. Samantha gave them both a hug. She offered to carry me, but I declined. wanting to learn my way around from my point of view. We were almost to our wagon when she saw some people coming and going. Opening night was at the close. Now was the time for the others to tend to the animals and clean the tent. Then everyone would settle in for the night. Everyone helped with chores except the performers. They only cleaned their own trailers, or hired someone who did, since the ringmaster tolerated no slobs in his carnival. We saw the ringmaster near our wagon. He waved and walked towards us. "I've been looking for you two." He smiled and asked how I was fitting in. Samantha smiled and she said she thought it was fine. I smiled and told him I was being treated with kindness and like the people I'd met so far. "Anytime you need to talk, my trailer's at the end of the path, by the patio table. It's the line between the performers and the freaks." He didn't say the terms in disgust or anything bad. I like that. "Tomorrow, we'll talk with Derek, the craftsman, and ask him to build your doll box. You'll be put in display as a living doll. If you don't mind, that is. Samantha will help you with costumes, alterations, or anything you need done. She's a seamstress with strong talents and strong imagination." "Oh, there's Derek now." The ringmaster waved Derek over. He was smiling at us. He bowed and I curtsied. The ringmaster looked between us curiously, but said nothing. Samantha coughed, but I could hear her laughter she was trying to mask. "I guess you two know each other. Derek, I'll need you to build an intricate box for our living doll." Derek was blushing. Samantha took the ringmaster to the side and said something in low tones. I heard "budding romance" in the whispering. I hoped they were right. Derek said after breakfast we would get started. If we would meet him at his workshop. I agreed. Samantha and the ringmaster joined us again. We told her the plan to start after breakfast. Samantha was good with the plan, and the ringmaster agreed. Derek stated he would sketch it up tonight before sleeping. Derek gave me another kiss on the cheek. Samantha gave a wave, and the ringmaster only said good night. Samantha didn't hold back the laughter this time as we watched Derek and the ringmaster walk away. Derek was looking back, waving. "Come on, little one. Looks like you have a busy day tomorrow." "Mia." She touched the top of my head. It reminded me of my father. I wondered how he was doing. I wondered if he even missed me. At our wagon, I dressed for bed while Samantha was in the bathroom getting ready for bed. She was talking to me, but I was thinking of Derek and not paying attention. I heard "I look different without makeup." I didn't care. She's Samantha. I'd sat down on my bed when she walked out of the bathroom, not looking like Samantha. I closed my mouth as soon as I realised it was open. Samantha was talking, and with my eyes closed, I could tell it was her. The room smelled of her vanilla perfume. I opened my eyes and Samantha looked back at me. Her hair hung in a long blonde braid. When she turned around, she looked more like a male. I knew I was staring, with my head tilted on to the side. She knelt down by me and held out her hands. They were Samantha's hands. "Do you know who I am?" The question held a sadness to it. I smiled and laid my hand on hers. "You're my best friend, Samantha." One tear was sliding down her face. I added, "With Scruff." She let out a laugh. Soon we were both laughing hard. It felt good. The woman used to be Sam, and was now Samantha. She was very kind to me, and my best friend, if not my family. Across the compound, a dwarf heard our laughter, and slept the best he had slept in a long time. Chapter 6. Showcased as a living doll. I slept well, but I couldn't get dressed fast enough. I'll be spending time with Derek today. I plan to get to know him very well. Samantha would show me the way, but she had duties to perform today. She was certain Derek would take good care of me. She kept assuring me I would be in good hands. I knew she was teasing me. The carnival people were very busy today. Some were practicing or cleaning, some were having breakfast. We stopped and ate pancakes with Shorty. His wife made the best coffee I'd ever tasted. After breakfast, Samantha stopped in front of Derek's and winked, waving goodbye. Derek was sitting on an engraved bench, having coffee. When he saw me, he stood and walked over. He offered to show me around his shop. The workshop was grand. Tools I'd never seen before hung on a pegboard. There was a wall with sketches and measurements. A long workbench held projects in various stages of being completed. He looked like he was building many, many things. I kept looking at his tools. I had a score to settle, and I was planning it out carefully. Derek saw me looking his tools over. He may have known what I was thinking. I wondered if he had ever had those thoughts. But I didn't know how he came to be at the carnival. One of the sketches was of a house. At the back of the workshop was a house. He had built his own house on wheels. Each room was customized to his height. It was beautiful. That explained why the back of his workshop had a wooden wall and a door. I was going to ask if I could see it. He came over and shook my hand, leading me to the side of the workshop as a bell rang. He said it was time for lunch. I was introduced to many freaks of all shapes and sizes. I was the smallest of them. Some of them were a little standoffish at first, not knowing what to make of me or my height. I suppose a few were afraid they would hurt me. To be honest, a thought had occurred to me as well. Samantha was there for lunch. She usually liked to carry me around so I wouldn't get stepped on. However, Derek presented me with a platform-type stroller. He lifted me to sit on it. It was a throne, and I could be wheeled around by him because he looked like he'd made the height for that very reason. I liked the idea of us spending time alone together. It was made from stroller wheels and a frame, but the baby bucket was gone, and there was a grand engraved chair made to fit the frame. The chair could be used separately as well. There was even a soft pillow. I suspected Samantha had made that. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I kissed him on the mouth in front of everyone. While some clapped in cheers, others simply shook their heads and smiled. The ringmaster sat down with us. He showed me a flyer headlining me with the freaks as a living doll. I would go and display that night. I frowned at being new and headlined. I didn't want it to create animosity between myself and the other freaks. Samantha explained all freaks were headlined at least once, especially new members, once everyone was sure they would fit in with the family. I felt better with the knowledge that all freaks were given their moment. Even better, now that I had a real family. Sometimes I would sit on my new chair, so the new ringmaster knew about it. Other times I would be standing, but actually would be sitting on a stool which my dress would cover. In a glass case with a hidden hinge on the inside, I could get out if I wanted to, so I wouldn't get scared. All I had to do was wave to people and smile or sing if I wanted to. I liked the box because people couldn't touch me or poke me or make sure I was real. When I was on my chair, I would sit and eat popcorn while they stared at me. It was great fun for the people and for me. I looked at it like they were being amused. It was like amusement for each other. I saw my face on a newspaper with Samantha. It said she was my mum, and we had both had a laugh at it. So Derek and most of the freaks did too. Reporters hadn't taken photos that I knew of, so I was surprised to see our picture. One quiet night, I was in my box waiting for Samantha to come and get me, which was our routine at the end of the night. It was almost close when a man walked into the tent. I sat still and watched him. I couldn't see his face, but I felt something. There was something familiar about him, about the way he stood and walked. Father. It was my father. He came up and looked at me in my new clothes that Samantha had made. My chair was sitting outside my box. I should have asked more money for you. His voice was dripping with hatred. Why? I thought, feeling a panic from in my chest. They sold me. They didn't get to talk to me that way. He picked up my chair and repeatedly hit it against the wooden frame of my box. It made the glass I was enclosed in vibrate and shatter, showering me with the glass and wood splinters from the box frame, the box Derek had made for me. I was so scared I started to cry. Then something switched, and I became mad. So mad I couldn't stand still. I opened the hidden hinge on the inside of my box and stepped out. I pulled the long crotchet hook out of my shawl I was making and stabbed him right in the eye so hard that the hook on the end pulled his eye right out of the socket. He was screaming and writhing on the ground in pain. Samantha came running in at the time. I didn't say anything except, "My father," and shook his eye on the hook. Derek walked in and assessed the area after hearing someone wail. He saw me with an eyeball, my box broken, chair damaged, and looked at the man. Dad? Was the only question he sounded amused. Derek went and tied the tent closed. It was almost time for close for the night anyway. What do we do now? Samantha inquired with a smile. Father had passed out. He never could stand pain. News spread quickly among the freaks about what had happened to me. Shorty came up with a butcher's axe. Matilda had a sewing kit. Samantha picked up some garden scissors from somewhere. Derek had a power tool I'd never seen before. Someone took the pinned eyeball from my hand. At one time, I had a father. What had attacked me, I had no idea what he was. The ringmaster came and took me to his trailer. There was a woman there who I knew as a bearded lady. He sat me in the table. She began removing hairpins and glass, adding glass with splinters from my skin and clothes. And luckily, I only had a few scratches. Nothing deep. I heard someone scream, and I jumped. The bearded lady said, "Newcomer!" in a monotone voice, like it was supposed to answer all questions. She continued cleaning glass shivers off me without stopping. After it was all clean, the ringmaster carried me to my wagon, asking for the clothes I had on. At the doorway, he pulled the door almost closed and handed them to him, where he shook them out. I changed into a long t-shirt and leggings with slippers. He asked for my brush so he could brush out any remaining debris. I was surprised he asked. Still, I got my brush for him. My damaged but not broken chair was there, still on its stand. He sat me in my chair while he brushed my hair. He was very methodical, and I was sure he had removed all the debris. I would still be careful when I washed it, just to be on the safe side. When Samantha returned to the tent, the ringmaster left. I thanked him, but he kept walking. Samantha didn't talk either. Why was no one talking to me? I didn't do anything wrong. I thought about looking for Derek, but I wouldn't be able to handle him not talking with me. Maybe I could go to the mess hall. The ringmaster said if I ever needed him, to go to his trailer. I ran to his trailer and knocked, but no one answered. I decided to wait by the patio. I sat on a brick near a chair with my back to the tree. I heard the ringmaster and a man talking about the newcomers. There would be 2 of them to begin with, a man and a woman. More would be joining. They would be short-term with the carnival. He wasn't sure they would survive to move to the next town with us. Survive? I was not really sure what that meant. And eavesdropping wasn't a good practice after all. I coughed so they would know I was there. The ringmaster looked round, and I stood up. Not that it helped. When he saw me, he looked at something between sad and worn out. Come on, Mia. Let's go inside the trailer and talk, he said in a resigned voice. Looking at the man he was talking to, he said, Better get Samantha for this, Grady. The man nodded and left. The ringmaster poured a couple of drinks. He looked around for something and looked triumphant when he found a beautiful ceramic doll teacup. He poured some of the same drink into it and handed it to me. He took a large drink from one of the glasses he poured and then filled it back up. I took a big drink too and then coughed. My eyes burned and I couldn't breathe. He looked at me as if to ask if I was all right. I shook my head, yes. Took a deep breath, coughed and took another drink. It was easier this time. He smiled and filled my thimble. I had a feeling I was going to know what a hangover was tomorrow. Samantha didn't knock on arrival, she just walked straight in, only to see the ringmaster and I filling our glasses up, a cup a third a time. She reached over like she was going to take my cup, and I shook my head no. She drew her hand back and sat down. She pointed to the third glass, and we shook our heads. Yes. She downed it in one swallow, followed by a wheeze and a cough. Fill her up. He filled her glass for a second. All I could think was that if I got drunk, anyone could carry me home. If Samantha was drunk, it would take all the freaks to help her stumble home. That thought made me laugh. Grady came back and announced that they were moving my display. The ringmaster gave a thumbs up and downed his drink, leaving with Grady. Samantha downed her drinks, so I finished mine too. I was about ready for bed. Samantha bent down to scoop me up, and I jumped back, nearly tripping over my feet. We both laughed. It was going to be interesting to see how we made it back to the wagon. Fortunately, someone almost as tall as Samantha showed up. Andy, I think his name was. I was hoping to see Derek, but a clown whose name or face I didn't get because my head felt swollen helped me back to the wagon. Chapter 8. Questions and answers, or not. I woke to someone pounding on the door. Shorty. He had a thermos of coffee, eggs, bacon, sausage, and toast. He said he had slaughtered a pig to get rid of my hangover, He winked and smiled. The smell of coffee woke Samantha. She wasn't all in bed. Half of her was hanging off. I used a feather boa on her feet to wake her. Apparently, all that did was make her need to pee. The way she jumped up and hit her head, I was laughing so hard I almost spat my food out. When she reappeared, she said we had a meeting with the ringmaster first thing that morning, after breakfast and, most of all, after coffee. While I didn't care for the sound of that, I finished my breakfast and some of hers. I'd never eaten so much in my life. It must have been alcohol-induced. We took turns in the shower and dressed for the meeting. It was at the mess hall, so it involved everyone. Samantha grabbed our tray and we walked over to the mess hall, handing it over to Matilda. She looked happy we ate. We were the last two to arrive. I guessed. Derek wasn't there yet, but the ringmaster was starting. I'll start off with the unpleasantness which occurred last evening. I felt like I was going to lose my breakfast as the memories flooded back. The ringmaster looked at me. He looked apologetic. I nodded him for him to continue, and he cleared his throat. Mia was attacked last night. The identity of the man makes no difference. Mia did well defending herself in removing his eye, decapitating her attacker until help arrived. Thank you, Samantha. Samantha nodded with tears in her eyes. Mia hasn't been with us long enough to know all the rules, or even be familiar with how this family is. He looked right at me, and I could hear the emotion in his voice. This family will defend each other to the death, literally, even if it means the death of someone who threatens us. The man who attacked you will be staying with the carnival for a couple of days. I took a deep breath and started to speak. Shh, listen now. His voice held a harsh, hard tone. He was dealt with. You removed an eye. Samantha removed the other one with gardening shears. His eyes have been sewn shut by Samantha. His tongue was cut out by Derek and sewn by Matilda. The man cannot speak against you or any of us. Matilda will care for him until CHP remove him. I had my hand over my mouth. I was in shock, and hearing the horrifying story, I pictured a stranger. The man last night was not my father. I called in carnival horror performers to finish the show with us. They're clowns of sorts. What they really are is a clean-up crew. They also do damage control, so there is no bad publicity or any mention of the man ever being here, or what was done with him. He will cease to exist. There is one thing all of you should know. The CHP, as they prefer to be called, do not work for money or favours. They require a pound of flesh. They removed it from this man in the early hours this morning by removing his limbs. He signed his papers with blood, indicated he had joined us of his own free will. He has no name and be referred to as it, as well as the others, for the duration of their stay. I saw others staring towards the path to the regular performance. A fire breather was walking toward us. Everyone sat still. The ringmaster continued. This is Monroe, the fire breather. He sealed the wounds closed on the injured man after the CHP were finished dealing with him. He walked up to me. I am Monroe. It was my honour to defend you. He nodded and walked away. I didn't know what to say. I was overwhelmed, mad that this had to happen, and happy that I had others who wanted me there, who would do anything to protect me. But I needed to get away. I jumped down and ran. No one said anything, they just let me go. I ran until I was out of breath. Realistically, it probably wasn't far, but it was space, and I needed the air. Chapter 9. Invitations. I sat for what seemed just a short while. I'm guessing it was much longer since I heard the bell announcing mealtime. I pondered over the fact a man was sitting somewhere without eyes, without a tongue, with no limbs. I didn't feel sorry for him. He was being cared for, until whatever was decided for him. Either way, it had nothing to do with me. As far as I knew, my real father, not this thing that showed up last night, was living his everyday dull life, being bullied by mother. My mind had to stay in that place. Mother would get hers too. I stood and walked back to the wagon. I wanted sleep. I took the long way round to avoid running into everyone. There were no tents, only tall for me, grass. I reached my wagon unnoticed and went to sleep. Surprisingly, I guess, I passed out. Someone was banging on a wagon door. It was Grady. He said Matilda wanted to see me. I looked for my slippers until he pointed at my feet. I had fallen asleep with them on. Matilda was cleaning up from dinner. I'd missed 2 meals today. Come, child, eat. It's only pulled pork barbecue, but we're cleaning up the pig we slaughtered. Tomorrow will be bacon, ham, and whatever else we can use. Matilda had a swing to her step and reminded me of what her grandmother would be like if I ever had one. I picked up my food and not really hungry. Matilda was frowning at me. Brushing it around your plate won't do you any good. You need to eat, child. I set the fork down and pushed the plate away. I'm sorry. I thought of eating meat and knowing a man lost his limbs. My voice trailed off, and I bowed my head. I knew she wouldn't feed us body parts. I just couldn't swallow, really, anything right now. Child, that's pure meat. I understand the weak stomach. She sighed, and I asked if I wanted anything else. Fried toast and your wild berry jelly? I asked sheepishly. Matilda gave a big grin and turned on the fire to make my fried toast. I always liked the butter cooked into the toast. The smell of the butter cooking made my stomach growl. The toaster made even the best bread taste of cardboard, no matter what you slathered on it. While I was eating my toast and jelly, Matilda poured me a glass of milk bigger than I was. I have homemade peanut butter for your pancakes tomorrow too. She winked at me. I've no idea how she knew I liked peanut butter on pancakes. After I finished eating, Matilda confessed why she had sent for me. I knew all about that man and what he said to you. What he did to your things. You were right about what you did. He told everything before we cut his tongue out. My eyes started to water. Matilda handed me a handkerchief. It smelled like butter and cake. Child, just you forget all about it. We know about her too. His wife. She was no mother to you, Mia. She'll be getting hers too. I could only hope. Matilda handed me a piece of paper. It was a flyer to attend the carnival and freak show. 1 night only. Some certain families are getting an invite to the carnival. They are bad people. Like the one who tried to hurt you last night. He was carrying a money demand. He was wanting more money for you from when they sold you. She sighed and continued. We're going to have a few disfigured freaks for a few days. Then them CHP boys will clean everything up. She had her voice down low, like she didn't want anyone to hear what she was telling me. The more I heard, the madder I became. How can I help? Matilda grinned and handed me an envelope for Mother's address. I addressed it, and she put it in her apron pocket. It looked like she had collected a few envelopes. How many would be attending this special invitation? I wasn't sure why I was whispering. I would think everyone knew what would happen. We have one more night open to the public tonight. The next night will be special. It will be the night before we pack up and roll out. That gives us a day, and we don't look like we know anything, since we are not in a hurry. There will be 3 people attending, at the least. You know one for another, Samantha, and the other will be for Derek. You don't know it, but you all are from around the same area. Chapter 10. Plan. The invitations were hand-delivered that evening by Monroe. He was handsome and would make Mother feel special. I didn't know about the others who were invited, but I was guessing they were a parent or caregiver too. Monroe came to the mess hall to let us all know the letters were delivered and accepted. All 3 would be attending for their special showing. I was sitting on my chair and asked him for a hug. He smiled and hugged me back. Monroe walked back down the path, whistling. I sat back down, contemplating the upcoming deeds. I knew Sam needed closure from her past. I hadn't seen Derek, and I missed him. I didn't know if he was okay, or okay with what was going to happen. Derek chose that time to make an appearance. It was only Shorty, Matilda and myself there, so they disappeared. Derek and I just stared at each other. He came over to my chair and hugged me. I held him as long as he would let me. We exchanged a kiss that made someone watching whistle. A grin broke us apart. Voyeur, Derek yelled into the shadows. It was Samantha and the ringmaster. A fella can't get no privacy around here, he grumbled, but smiled too. Shorty and Matilda reappeared too, all smiles. The ringmaster invited us all to sit down. Derek set me back on my chair and sat next to me, still holding my hand. Our family of freaks here, and a few performers, along with CHP, will be changed after tomorrow night. Everyone is in agreement as to what needs to be done. In the past, we have eliminated threats, eliminated the ones who hurt or would hurt our family here. Also, the CHP will not be allowed in the freak camp area unless it is to remove a threat. The ringmaster sounded stern and looked tired. I assist you all get a good night's rest tonight. Tomorrow will be exhausting. In the meantime, I need to go finish tonight's final performance before we close out. The ringmaster stood, dusted imaginary dust from his tux, and stood walking back to the big tent. Matilda brought a fresh pot of coffee from the campfire and some apple pie, fresh from the stone oven. I really wasn't hungry, but it smelled too good to resist. I loved the smell of cinnamon and butter. We ate in silence, each of us contemplating what we needed to do in order to have closure and move on to happy lives. After we helped Matilda clean the mess hall, we said our good nights and went our separate ways. Except for Derek, who pushed my chair and saw Samantha and I to our wagon. Samantha said goodnight and went in. Derek and I exchanged a kiss and just held each other for a moment. He lifted me down and helped me into the wagon, calling goodnight to Samantha. I gave one more kiss before closing the door. Derek was singing as he walked away. The next morning was brought to us with a commotion. Matilda was ringing the bell hard, which meant trouble. "The CHP are in our camp," she was screaming, her vast lungs out. Matilda was having a fit. Before breakfast, the ringmaster had firmly stated they would not be allowed in the freak camp. We jumped up and got dressed. We heard yelling, and I'm positive she had been throwing pans and everything else at them. I heard the ringmaster yell, and everyone was silent. The fire breather Monroe came up behind him, trying to tell him something. Samantha and I reached the mess hall right behind the ringmaster and Monroe. The "it" died during the night, lasting 2 days. His real name was not recorded, for we did not know it. We had him for the shortest duration. CHP have disposed of the body, feeding it to the pigs. Any bones or parts remaining will be ground into dust into the ground, making a nice fertilizer. We will always till up the ground where hogs have been, so there will be nothing suspicious. That is all which will be said on this matter. The ringmaster and Monroe sat and requested coffee. Some CHP had picked up her pans, and Matilda pointed to CHP to sit. I guessed everyone was having coffee this morning. I should have felt remorse, but in fact, I only felt relief. Part of my nightmare had ended. A man I'd called father was non-existent. All that was left was a hateful, mean man. Maybe it's who he was all along. I wouldn't torture myself with what might have beens or what ifs. It ended. Tonight, Mother would get hers. Chapter 11. Plan in motion. Now to make a plan. First of all, I'd needed a big mirror. Since Mother was always perfectly made up, I thought it should be permanent. She wouldn't look good with wrinkles, for starters. The skin on her face should be pulled tight. An alligator clamp on the sides of her face by each ear. Better yet, she never wanted pierced ears because she felt the holes would disfigure her. so she wore clips. We could make a hole on the outside rim where the cartilage was, on each ear, and pull them back with wires until they touched the back of her head. Secure them there with the wire. A grinder on her cheeks would give her the rosy glow she always tried for. She always told me beauty was pain. I'd be taking advice from her on that one. Use blue paint for eyeshadow. It was her favourite colour. We might need to thin it with turpentine so it spread smoothly. Industrial glue for eyelashes. We wouldn't want them to come off. I saw a can in Derek's shop. Mother only said mean things, so we'd cut her tongue out to give her inner beauty a chance to shine. For her red lips, lipstick wouldn't be good enough. Sear them with a hot poker. That should have the red full lips she always wanted. She always was breaking her nails, so maybe we should remove them for her. She hated her underarm flab, that, and her fat thighs, so remove her arms and legs. Should be so much happier with all of her problem beauty areas fixed. And to think, with all the mean things she had said to father and myself, I'd be the one to make certain she'd be beautiful for the rest of her life. The bell rang for mealtime. Matilda had still made us a meal in the midst of all the commotion. Samantha was nowhere to be seen. I still had on my long t-shirt, leggings and flats. They would do for now. I was small, but my body was shaped like an adult. All of my limbs were in proportion to my body. I looked like a beautiful woman shrunk in size. However, there would be no makeup on this woman for today. I pulled my hair into a long braid. It was quiet, except for people eating and cutlery touching plates. Several were finished by the time I arrived at the mess area. Matilda saw me and came over to help me into a tall chair with arms. To eat at the table instead of on it. I knew from the carvings it was Derek's craftsmanship. She walked away before I could ask when he brought it down. When did he have time? Samantha appeared and sat down beside me. She didn't look well. Exhausted would be my guess. She gave me a tired smile and touched my hand. Derek finished it last night and asked me to bring it out. She gave me a half-hearted smile. Matilda set homemade peanut butter and blueberry syrup on the table. A minute later, I had a stack of pancakes the size of $half. Just my size. I could smell the warm bananas. Yum. I was so busy spreading peanut butter and eating, I didn't notice a glass of milk being set beside me. Or Derek standing there, waiting for a hello. Remind me never to disturb you when you're eating. Derek sounded like he was pouting. He looked it too. Samantha let out a little laugh. As if you could. Derek leaned over. I thought for a kiss, but it was to wipe peanut butter off the corner of my mouth. Hey, I was saving that for later. I tried to act indignant. Not if you want a kiss from me, baby doll. I'm not into peanut butter like you are. He stuck his tongue out at me. I promptly wiped my fork with peanut butter on it on his tongue. He threw his tongue back in his mouth. Hey, that's just bad! Matilda came up behind him and lifted him onto the seat beside me. Good. Then eat up, lover man. He sat on the other side of him, chuckling. We were all laughing and watching to see what his next move would be. He took a spoon of peanut butter, placed it on a plate by his pancakes. He cut a piece and wiped some peanut butter with it. Man, store-bought stuff has nothing on this, and promptly cut another mouthful. That's what I thought, Matilda mused out loud. Shorty brought over cups along with the coffee pot. We were the last to eat, I suppose. The ringmaster and Monroe were coming up the path. I was beginning to think they had only come around to deliver bad news. Shorty went to make more pancakes. Monroe saw what we were eating. Man, you guys eat well on this side of the camp. Shorty yelled. Breakfast will be done soon, so sit down. You don't have to tell the fire breather twice. Chapter 12. Newcomers. After we had all eaten, we wanted a nap. Instead, the ringmaster asked if we were ready to reveal our plans with CHP, so they would have their plans sorted out as well. I said I was ready. Monroe went to get the CHP. Samantha and Derek were surprised I was ready. I've thought on it all night, was all I could say. They both shook their heads in agreement. The head of the CHP was a bit creepy, but nothing worse than what I was planning. He went by Sander and looked a bit of a badass, even with his clown face on. I pulled out the list of what needed to be done and in what order. Sander looked me up and down, letting out a long whistle. Remind me never to piss you off. But if you ever want to change professions, you look me up. He winked. I saw steam come from both Derek and the ringmaster. Sander noticed. Just kidding, guys. Relax. It's serious enough. At that, we were all in agreement. Samantha and Derek read over my list. Mine is nowhere near that detailed, Derek admitted. Samantha said, mine would just be slice and dice. An apology would be nice, but I'm not holding my breath for it. Excuse the pun. Okay, Mia. Mia will deal with hers first. We'll get everything in there and she'll need, plus whoever will help with the different tasks. Let's get this done, folks, so we can go to the ranch to recuperate. The ranch was the ringmaster's ranch. Everyone who didn't have outside family was expected to stay at his ranch until the next scheduled booking. Freaks and performers alike. I asked Samantha for a big mirror, a hollow piercing needle, large gauge. She went to get them for me. From Derek, I asked for pliers, wire, blue paint, thinned a little. I wouldn't need much. A grinder with harsh sandpaper on it, industrial glue, heated metal of some kind, and lastly, his bone saw. Matilda offered her garden shears and asked if she could have the honours. I was fine with that. I had her red lipstick to outline where I would burn her. I would see her in the clothes I had on, only because it would infuriate her. Plus, the bare minimum of makeup. My hair braided. Everything she hated. Oh, and I would be reading my book. The stage was set, so I went and got ready. By the time I was back, Everything I had requested was in the tent, with my chair on the table for her to view me. Samantha, the ringmaster, and Derek would be waiting behind the tent with Sander. Monroe would be escorting her through the tents. Matilda was on hand to cut her tongue out as soon as it was needed. Derek gave me a kiss and sat me on my chair, exiting through the tent flaps. I took a deep breath as soon as I heard Monroe and Mother coming down the walkway, which had public access. There was an old wooden chair not far from me. That must have been from the ringmaster. He looked over at Samantha's mirror. I looked amazingly calm, with a little pissed mixed in for good measure. As soon as Mother saw me, I saw hatred. I have no idea what she expected, but I guarantee this night was not it. She smiled sickeningly sweet. She smelled sickeningly sweet of too much perfume and too much alcohol. Her face and clothing were perfect, except that she had stepped in horseshit. Wow. Wonder how that had happened. I really didn't want to be amused at the moment. Well, you're still here, Mia. I thought they would have common sense enough to sell you off or do away with you. You look atrocious. Where are the clothes we wasted money on? I suppose they needed a ragged-looking doll. She sneered at me, the venom dripping from her mouth. If the fire breather had had a shovel or a heavy object, she would have stopped speaking. Your father left, you know. Gone almost a week now. He was never good for anything. Never amounted to nothing. Never been anything. I couldn't help smiling. Once he started, she would never say a hateful word again. Chapter 13. Punishment, Round 1. Why would you have cause to smile, you little nothing? Matilda heard enough. She stood, and Mother yelled. Sit back down, you cow. This is between me and that is as far as she got before Shorty hit her upside her head with a shovel. The sound of the dull thud made me jump. Matilda picked her up and dropped her in the chair, facing the mirror. Next was a bit unexpected as Matilda grabbed her tongue and lopped it off in one smooth motion. Mother didn't even have time to scream. Shorty grabbed the needles and shoved them on both sides of her ears, quickly running the wire through, pulling it tight. I heard her skin rip as her ears were pulled and pinned with wire to the back of her head. Derek had come in with the grinder and was running it over her cheeks. There was a step stool by her for me now. I painted her eyelids blue with paint, asking if she wanted a little shadow or a lot. She shook her head. I added more. She tried to scream, but she was all mumbles. I ripped her fake lashes off her eyes and applied a small amount of glue to them, sticking them back on. We're just getting started. Keep your eyes open and let me know if I'm doing anything right. It's my turn to sneer at her. I couldn't recognise her expression if I'd needed to. She had no wrinkles, no expression, just a bit swollen. I smeared red lipstick over her lips, going around them like a clown's. The fire breather had heated a metal stick, easy for me to handle. Her eyes grew large despite the swelling. When I brought the hot metal to her lips, I outlined them just like she had taught me, then filled in the lip with colour. Red hot metal was the colour. I hoped she'd like it. I decided against pulling her nails out. She'd broken most of them in the struggle, and a few of the nail beds were bleeding anyway. I called for Sander. He sent us all out of the tent and sent for his crew. We didn't have much time before Samantha's people showed up. When the bone saw came to life, I heard grunts, then nothing more. I heard it come to life 4 times, then nothing. The silence was deafening. CHP came running with heavy waterproof bags. When Sanders said we could come in, the tent was totally empty. Ready for round 2. Go get cleaned up, Mia. He turned and walked out. He was right. I looked a mess with paint, maybe a bit of blood on me. Samantha picked me up and ran with me back to the tent. We both needed to be ready for the next round, which was hers. Samantha had been smart and had her clean clothes ready set out. It didn't matter to me. Another long shirt, leggings and sneakers was my plan. Samantha took the clothes we had removed and gave them to the fire breather. They would disintegrate in his forge in no time. Whatever was left would be taken away by CHP. CHP always knew of someone pouring a drilling pad or plugging a hole to get rid of odds and ends like burnt up clothing. Monroe was pounding on the wagon door. "Get ready for round 2, he yelled. I asked Samantha what her plan was. I want to see if Dad recognises me. When I told him, I felt like a girl. He beat me until I bled. He threatened to castrate me with the balls if I brought it up again. Samantha was crying, and all I could do was hug her and offer a handkerchief. When she collapsed to sit on the floor, I held and comforted her. I was patting her back, and she burped, which was promptly followed by a fart. Looks like there was a bit of the old man still within me. We were both laughing tears. I know he won't accept me. I won't forgive him. He will lose his tongue, be castrated, then CHP can have all the flesh they want, no matter how rotten it is. I gave Samantha a final hug and kissed on her cheek. You should have shaved. I winked, and we both laughed. Monroe pounded on the door again. I opened it and tossed the rest to him. Come on already. Women. Sheesh. He was yelling, but it didn't mean we would hurry any faster. Samantha went into the tent. I'd been in earlier. There were 2 chairs, a work table off to the side of the tent with a few covered tools. Chapter 14. Round 2. A couple of cups of coffee were set up with a beautiful silver setting. It reminded me of a high tea. I told her to stay strong as I ducked under the bottom flap of the tent, where I lay down, waiting. Samantha was sitting, drinking coffee, when a man walked in. And who are you supposed to be? Samantha set her cup down. I and Samantha. Her voice did not waver. I was so proud of her. Boy, I told you, if you ever brought that shit up again, I'd castrate you and make you a girl myself. His voice was gruff and deep. Samantha cleared her throat and stood tall. He was as tall as Samantha, way shorter than Matilda. Old man, the only castration which will happen here tonight will be yours. I'd never hear Samantha speak with that cold tone, and honestly, it frightened me. I saw Samantha shove him back in the chair. He looked shocked. His face was turning bright red, even more when she punched him. His lights went out like a bulb in a Christmas tree. In one swipe, she cleared the table with her hand, picked him up with the other, and tossed him on the table like he weighed no more than a sack of flour. I think we all heard the hard grunt when he landed. Samantha grabbed his pants leg and tugged them down, reached on the ground floor for the baditso, a bloodless castration device. It resembled pliers. Quickly applying them to him, I would swear I heard a crunch, and he screamed. Matilda quickly appeared to cut off his tongue. Wait! Samantha's tone was sharp. Do you have anything to say now? Now that you are less of a man? He spat in Samantha's face. Matilda grabbed his tongue and cut it off. You could see he was holding back tears. Who knew if they were from pain or remorse? I was guessing only pain. Samantha was looking at him, shaking her head. Sander and his crew came in, sending Samantha and Matilda out. They made quick work of chopping off his arms and legs. The fire breather was called in to cauterize the wounds. Before we knew it, the room was cleaned and ready for Derek's turn. Derek was poking at a clump of weeds with his foot. I could see this was going to be a very emotional step for him. When he lifted his face to look at me, I didn't recognize him. His eyes almost glowed red. I want this over with, so I can be happy. Hopefully with you. I held his hand and smiled. Sander walked over to us with the ringmaster and Monroe. What's the plan? Do we have time for coffee? Derek sounded as tired as we all felt. Monroe announced the last ones had not shown up yet, so we headed to the mess hall. Matilda saw us coming and started pouring some coffee. It was silent for a few moments until Derek spoke. These people will not give me any more closure than the others did for the rest of you. If they even show up. My only request is to flog them first. Derek took off his shirt and turned with his back towards us. There were scars upon scars. He had been whipped. I gasped aloud. Sure others did as well. And he put his shirt back on. He looked at me, then took my hands, apologizing for showing me. I put my hands to my lips, kissing first the left hand, then the right. Never apologize for showing me what life has done to you. Derek bent down and kissed me, then told of his plan. My plan is simple. Whip whoever comes in with a cat and nine tails. Here is the one Mum and Dad took turns in using on me. Use this on whoever, then take all the flesh you want. I'll meet with them momentarily first. Derek presented something looking like a whip, but the leather was shorter, with strands on the end with glass, rock and other hard sharp objects attached by wire or leather. I felt sick. No wonder Derek's scars were so thick. We'd all drunk about half of our coffee before the heads were given up by Grady that we had visitors in the parking lot. Derek gave me a kiss, then motioned for CHP and Monroe. Shorty picked up the whip. "I'm doing this one, mate," was all he said. Derek nodded in agreement. I was guessing there was a history I didn't know yet. I wasn't sure if I was going to go to the tent or not. Derek might need me. I took another drink and sat my cup down. Chapter 15. Round 3. Derek was speaking with two people. I could only see one. Matilda and Monroe were nearby. So was CHP. "Why did you summon us here, boy?" "You're the one we came to get. You're behind on your chores, and you'll be getting a whipping for worrying your ma the way you did." I'm guessing this was his mum and dad in there with him. Derek was a dwarf, while his parents were full-sized. His mum was considerably shorter than his dad, though. "This isn't about me. I did this, all this, for you." Derek sounded monotone, no emotion in his voice or in his body language. About that time, Sander and CHP crew walked in, grabbing his parents by their arms. His dad started screaming bloody murder. Matilda walked in, and his jaw fell open. His mum looked at him and started crying. His parents didn't notice Shorty coming in. "You're my son. How can you treat us so badly?" she started to wail with no tears falling. "You're the one who treated me badly. Why, you ungrateful little..." Shorty hit her back with a cat-o'-nine-tails. She really did scream then. His dad tried to take the words back. "You know, we didn't mean it, son. Just like you don't mean this. Just come home and things will be back to normal after you receive your punishment for running off." Shorty hit his back. The man didn't cry or scream. He stood there, his face turning all shades of pissed off. Derek shook his head, and Shorty hit them both again. His mum acted like she couldn't stand. His dad didn't say a word. Shorty dropped the whip and walked out of the tent. Sander picked it up. "Boys." Sander's boys made Derek's parents stand tall. "Anything else?" His dad only glared at him, his mum wailing like she was dying. "Well, not yet." Matilda reached over, pulled her tongue, and cut it off. Then his dad screamed. Matilda stood in front of him. He wouldn't open his mouth. Derek held out the baditso, and his mouth opened. Matilda used the opportunity to grab his tongue and snipped it off. Once Matilda was out of the way, Sander motioned for everyone to leave the tent. We could hear the cat-o'-nine-tail making contact, ripping flesh. Sometimes there was a grunt, but nothing else. The bone saw was fired up. We all walked out, back to the mess to finish our coffee, leaving CHP to do the job. Shorty had fresh coffee waiting for us when we returned, along with some finger sandwiches. Matilda shook her head and laughed with Shorty. It seemed like the day to make finger sandwiches. We tried to act surprised, but they really were good. Sander joined us about an hour later. Jobs are all done. We've been paid in full and then some. I had to ask, no matter how much blood was on us, their makeup was still on, and their clothes had no signs of the day. Sander, if I may ask, how did you and your crew stay so clean throughout all that? I was a mess. I was hesitating to ask him, but he was laughing. What you see are our faces, not makeup. Our skin absorbs blood, which is why we require a pound of flesh for each of us to eat. We can go weeks without eating, but when we have an opportunity like this, our bodies store food like camels store fatty tissue. What we don't want, dogs clean up. I wasn't certain if my finger sandwich would stay down, even if it was just cheese. Not after learning of them eating fingers and everything else. The ringmaster stood, walking over to shake Sanders' hand. Thank you for your services. I'm positive there will be more along the way. Sanders waved goodbye, making eye contact with Derek, Samantha, and myself. We all waved back. When the ringmaster sat back down, he announced we would roll out tomorrow, when everyone was ready. It was time to go home, to the ranch. Chapter 16. Homeward Bound. Shorty came over with another pot of coffee, filling our cups. My vote is after breakfast. It will be hot ham and cheese sandwiches if everyone gets here early enough. Otherwise it will be cold ham and cheese. Shorty was in a good mood today. Getting rid of some frustrations must have done him a world of good. It was late and I was ready to call it a night. Several others were yawning too. Derek walked me to the wagon, and I noticed Monroe walking Samantha to the wagon, holding her hand. I nudged Derek and said, About time. Those two have been flirting for years. He winked at me. At the door, Derek stood me on the stairs and gave me a long kiss, which made my knees too unsteady. Samantha had picked Monroe up and stood him on the bench. He was only a head shorter than she was, and he was giving her a kiss she'd never forget. Meet you for breakfast bright and early, Mia. At breakfast. I think both Samantha and I were love-struck. Sleep came easy. So did waking up to the sound of people waking up. Hammers and tents falling, wagons idling. By the time Samantha and I were dressed and outside, the big top was down and being rolled. Most of the freaks lived in wagons and they were lining up. The performers had their trailers lined up, with some of them already gone. The animals were being fed and ready for transport. They lived at the ranch on a semi-open range, or big enclosures when not working. Derek and Monroe were coming down the path toward us for breakfast. We walked in as couples, holding hands. Shorty was thanking his maker for something and smiling. Over coffee and breakfast, Monroe asked if he could ride to the ranch with Samantha. The sword swallower would be driving his wagon to his home, which was on the way. Monroe could take over driving the team for Samantha. Before she could answer, Derek asked if I'd ride in his wagon with him. He had made me a seat for a comfortable ride. How could I say no to that? I looked at Samantha, who was smiling, and agreed. She agreed with Monroe. We finished eating, and helped Shorty finish storing plates and supplies. We were all ready to head to the ranch and to a new life ahead. Behind us, Sander and the CHP crew were waiting, for they knew that before they were hungry, we would be ringing the dinner bell.